Hello, Sirus from Sirus Gaming Spot here, and welcome to Sirus Gaming Corner, a gaming podcast where I and Swordfish 1390 talk about various gaming topics. From old game to new, everything is fair game. So, how's your evening going so far, Sword?
Oh, going good. Always a pleasure to be back on.
So, for today's topic, I'm first going to ask Sword about his opinion on Final Fantasy 16. This will lead to something somewhere. You probably guess what it's going to lead to, but you know. So, what's your opinion on Final Fantasy 16?
So I want to say, judging on how it's going, I'm probably more than halfway through the game story-wise, I want to say. And honestly, I am adoring this game. This is, first of all, I wasn't a big fan of 15, so this to me feels kind of like a big, it addresses pretty much every problem I have with 15. It's got like the story is gripping. I'm really attached to the characters, and there's a lot of mysteries, some really cool reveals every now and then that I've seen. I still got a lot more to come because there's still so many threads not addressed just yet. Contrary to popular opinion, I know that the combat has been very contentious. I find it to be a lot of fun. Not the deepest action combat system I've ever seen, but honestly, there's still a good amount of depth to it. It's still very satisfying to pull off really lengthy and combos, and soundtrack is great. It's just, honestly, I'm loving the hell out of this game. It's definitely my game of the year so far. I don't know if anything's gonna top it, and if it keeps up this quality, I could see it ranking up as one of my favorite Final Fantasies. So yeah, definitely so far fantastic game. So that's my that's my take.
Okay, for me, I haven't played that much of it. Strange, seeing as how I bought the collector's edition, and then I just got a bunch of work stuff to do, and yeah. So far I say I'm really liking it. I think like this game is very, very story focused, and it's very, let's say, explicit with some of the scenes, shall we say. even more so the Final Fantasy. Like, the first 15 minutes is just a tone setter, I think.
It goes in a completely different direction than I expected.
Like, people say, oh, you're just not used to Final Fantasy being political and dark. No, I'm used to it. I play Final Fantasy Tactics. But like, Final Fantasy 16 and how it approaches it is pretty different from Final Fantasy Tactics, especially how explicit they handle one of the more adult themes, I guess. Especially when you see Benedicta.
Oh my god, yeah. I love Benedicta. She's great. She's one of those characters I love.
You can say she really put the dick in Benedicta.
She lives up to her name. And she is not shy about it.
And I feel like she's like what, like all of the explicit sexual themes, like scenes, is like mostly with her so far.
So, yeah, from what I've seen, like I said, I'm quite a bit of ways in.
There's like a scene where it could have went that way with Annabelle, but then
but then
Joshua's and Clive's father, Elwin, like say, nah, man.
He's like, nah, not feeling it, dog.
But yeah, but I don't think they're used like half-heartedly as a way to just draw people in.
And it doesn't feel like it's there just for like either shock value or just to be edgy.
It just feel appropriate. It just feel appropriate for when it's used, and on the character that's doing it, it fits for their characters. And
even then, it's pretty tame.
Yeah,
it's pretty tame, all things considered. Like, it's kind of like how you look at like something like, I don't know what kind of has a similar setting and tone. I guess like maybe like Dragon Age Origins, kind of like that. Like that game is way more.
Like if they're just gonna use sex just for
the hell of it,
the sake of it, the barn scene with Clive and Jill probably would went a lot different in the first place. Like for the first scene.
It feels tasteful, honestly.
It feels appropriate. So yeah.
So I don't find it to be like a distraction, and honestly, I haven't seen anything like that in a long time.
But besides that, I think like the world building is pretty interesting now. they get more into the bearer stuff, like past the Benedicta scene stuff, Benedicta arc, I think. But like the world building has been fine so far, but it looks like it's ramping up a bit after going to the village, going back to Rosaria. But I will say, like, Final Fantasy 16 seems to be really good at setting up like very interesting and big moments in the story.
Yeah, like it's always building up to something,
Yeah.
and it's more a matter of like, okay, you know something's gonna happen, you know there's gonna be, and there's gonna be a payoff,
Yeah.
and it always delivers.
I do like how the characters and setting and stuff feels like has a history to it already, besides having to do with Clive, like with Sid and Benedicta. That's the like you can feel there's something between them, and you're like,
and even though they don't like go into super detail, they give you enough to, you know. Not like there's not like a whole big exposition about like how they met, what they are to each other, and you know, et cetera, et cetera.
Like you can tell just from the way they talk and how the cutscenes are directed. And I think that's a good thing to do that, since it's so it doesn't just like dump you with exposition.
Yeah, instead of having like maybe like a long flashback or just, you know, again, like we said, just exposition and dialogue. I think what we got, it gave us just enough.
Yeah, I think like seeing the cinematography and how the scenes go help a lot with that, but I think the voice acting does too. I think this is like one of Final Fantasy's strongest voice cast so far.
It's definitely in the upper tier for sure. I think like the UK
that does go to caveat where I think Final Fantasy voice acting hasn't been too strong for like a good amount of the voice acted games.
It could be hit or miss depending on the title we're talking about, you know.
Like if you compare the voice acting from Final Fantasy to Tales, then I would say like Tales has like a stronger history of good English voice acting compared to Final Fantasy, in terms of like having a more natural and believable voice ranges for the characters they tell in Tales.
Yeah, Tales is usually a lot more consistent. Like even as far back as like Symphonia, it was still very strong. So
even like the weakest ones, it was just Symphonia 2. There's still some really some pretty good voice acted scenes in that game still.
Yeah, like between like I think a big part of this is not just the voice actors themselves, but also like voice direction. Yeah, I think Tales usually does.
Yeah, but Final Fantasy 16 is pretty strong in this department so far, I think.
Yeah, like I'm really a big fan of the UK localization they got, and I think the British voice acting really fits with the tone, because it's kind of I know it's been compared to death, and I don't think it's entirely accurate, but it's also not inaccurate. But it obviously is going for kind of a Game of Thronesy type of setting, and I do think that like the British voice actors are appropriate for the setting.
Oh yeah, what do you think of how they implement the active Time Lord thing?
I'm a big fan of that. Like, so I know a lot of people are critical of like the data logs in Final Fantasy 13 because it throws a lot at you at the same time. And you kind of just have to digest everything in a short amount of time. But in 16, what you do is like when you pause the game during a cutscene, it'll give you pieces of lore information that's relevant to that scene or what's going on in the story. As if this could be done as like a refresher if you forgot, or maybe you're just not clear about something. But it doesn't feel like I could like play the game without it and I'd be totally fine. I wouldn't be lost or anything. But it's good to have like clarification, and that it also kind of adds to like the fact that there's certain things that are fleshed out more in active time lore, but they're not like I don't need certain things explained to me in a cutscene. Yeah. Like for example, maybe it could be like I don't know. I'm just throwing out a random example. It could be like.
Do you know the Elwyn and Annabelle are cousins?
Oh God! Oh my! How did Clive and Joshua not get bored? Fucked up? Oh my God! Oh, that was information. Oh God! Hey, I'm not surprised, but anyway. Oh man, I mean, Annabelle was already bad as it is, but just that, I'm not gonna look at it the same again after that.
So yeah.
But yeah, it's like for example,
find that out in the active time lore, I think.
Okay, we'll see. Yeah, I never would have. And that, yeah, so exactly, it's things like that, like we don't need explained to us in a cutscene because it would just kind of bog it down with needless exposition. All the active time lore content is supplementary material, basically, and I think that's what makes it great. That's what makes it work. It's kind of like
I do like how like in turn with the dialogue you have to go to like an extra menu in order to access it. With active time lore, you have that resource available at all times. And if you do it during cutscene, it will display the relevant lore that you might need the context at, so you don't have to go searching that hard for it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, like you don't have to, because I'm a defender of Final Fantasy 13, but yeah, like you have to go through like, oh, go to data log, go to world, go to important people, and it's a lot of extra hoops you have to jump through to get some information. So I think 16 handles a lot better.
But yeah, so far like I got to the part where I've got his devil trigger, so to speak, or limit break as they call it in this game. Even
though we know exactly what it is.
we know it's a devil trigger. And I would say like the story so far, like despite the political background and how everybody seems to have like a history with each other and with the various lands that they occupy, it does seem very character focused so far.
Yeah, and it is, but I will say at the part that I'm at, it has been like adding more mysteries to the actual actual overarching story. Yeah. So it amps up in that too. It adds more mysteries, but yeah, it does place a very large emphasis on the characters, and I think that's great. I'm really I love Clive as a protagonist. I think that I'm really sympathetic to his struggles, and so yeah, I think the character work is very well done in this game.
Now, in regards to the combat,
oh boy, is this controversial.
I will say that I do find it fun once you get Garuda, and then you got like 2 icons to switch around with. I think they do a pretty good job making perfect dodge attacks to feel very satisfying to pull off if you do a perfect dodge and then counter attack. And then like comboing and mixing up moves does feel pretty good to do. But I'm not sure, like it does feel a bit basic, I guess.
I felt that way for a long time, but I think that it's like you said, once you get Garuda, and then like, so I have a total of 4 icons now where I'm at, and you could equip 3 at a time, and like
I think my problem is like I do like the icon system. It's basically style switching. That's basically what it is. I do like how like your like basic ability and then like your special attacks changes depending on the icon, which does increase the scope of what you can do. But I feel like this game's combat system is really based on pulling special attacks together.
Yeah, like having a string of consecutive.
You can't really do much once they're all on cooldown, I think. Because Clive's base moveset is pretty limited. You got like standard attack, magic burst attack, which is you do melee and magic attacks together intermediately with each other. You got magic attack, which is your range option. You can charge your melee or range attack to have like a charge variation, like how Nero can like charge his blue rose. And yeah, like you can do aerial combos with them, but it's like doing aerial combo with Clive does feel very clunky sometimes because he doesn't have a launcher in his base moves. So it feels very and there's not really much moves you can do with Clive's base moveset without the icons.
Yeah, like there's only one move, like one icon move that can launch enemies into the air, but that's it. And then once you do, it's on.
No, I mean not even that. Like I basically just try to knock the enemy over and then use charge magic blast, which launches them, and then I use the Phoenix's charge ability, which allow me to get to there. But without the Phoenix charge ability, Clive's aerial capability would be even more limited, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if you compare it to like a high octane...
I mean, it's a good thing that his charge ability, it doesn't have a cost to it. But like, if I'm in a different icon phase, it can makes things a bit clunky, I think. And there's just not many things you can do with Clive base moveset, and most of his moveset is based on using cooldown abilities. And I like how each cooldown abilities does have their own utility and use to them, as well as being powerful abilities to do. But I will, like, at least right now, like, it can get a bit there are lulls in the combat, I think, in the more gameplay, when you use your cooldowns and when you don't, when they're on cooldown.
Yeah, because once your abilities are on cooldown, you're stuck just doing basic attacks, and you're pretty much limited to just waiting. But I will say that once you get that third icon slot, that does make a good deal of difference.
Okay.
But I mean, it's still not perfect, but it does make it so.
But yeah, I do wish that you got more stuff to do by base combat system.
Yeah, because
like, I was at least expecting Clive to have like a launcher type of attack to do with the sword.
Yeah, which I was actually surprised, like, because when I played the demo, I was thinking, okay, well, we'll unlock that at some point. I'm sure that's in the skill tree, and no, there's nothing like that, so it's kind of, you know, but...
I don't know if he unlocks it later, but apparently not. I don't know. But yeah, like, it seems more like all the skill tree expands on is, like, the more icons you get.
Yeah, each icon gets its own little mini tree.
But yeah, but like... Still, even with that gripe, I do still find it a pretty fun combat system still. It's not gonna win, like... It's not gonna beat out, like, other action combat system who's, like, very dedicated to their combat systems, like Devil May Cry 5 or 3, or, you know, other action combat system of this style.
Yeah, like Bayonetta or, you know, anything. Metal Gear Rising.
But as designing it for people who haven't played a character action game before, it's good. I think it's pretty good.
And I can say confidently that it does improve as it goes. Like mixing and matching different icon moves, and you know, chain them together. It gets I felt pretty much the same as you did at the time, but it does, like I said, it does get better with more icon abilities. So. I
would say, like, maybe, like, now that I got Devil Trigger, it'll probably expand at those times. That you have another resource you can use, but, like, so far, right now, it does feel, limiting sometimes. Yeah,
no, it definitely does. Even now, sometimes it can, but like I said, it gets better as it goes, so.
Let's see. Oh yeah, difficulty. What do you think of the difficulty of Final Fantasy 16?
So I'm playing on the action difficulty. There's the story difficulty action. I'm playing on, honestly, I think it's pretty easy. I think I only died once. There was only one boss that I died on, and it was just because I just wasn't quick enough to dodge a certain move. That's Roach Instinct Kill. But otherwise, I've been pretty much breezing through it, honestly. I do wish it was a little more challenging.
I haven't died once yet, so far.
Yeah. Like I said, like the death I had was just like it was just an accident. It wasn't even because it was a hard fight. It was just a move I didn't dodge in time. But yeah, so yeah, I do. It is honestly, I wouldn't say it's like brainless or anything, but it is kind of a breeze.
I would say that it seems pretty easy from what I've played. And I've only I got hit a few times because I was trying to get more to the perfect dodge timings. But if I just if I didn't really care about perfect dodges, I probably can see it being more easier if you just don't care about perfect dodge timing. And there are sometimes where I try to do parry timing, but I get hit by that too. But I think enemies don't really hit that hard so far.
They really don't, honestly. Like
Yeah.
it's never a threat. And honestly, a lot of the enemies go down pretty quickly.
Like I'm thinking of using a no potion run, essentially.
Yeah, I feel like at that point, really, the way it's going, that's really probably the only way to challenge yourself.
Like I get my potions and high potions to max, and like I just heal by collecting them within the fields. Because how the potion system works is that when you get an access potion or high potion, you get healed by that amount if you can't carry anymore. And how the game is designed, they usually put a potion or high potion after major encounters. So I think that sort of feels a more fair challenge so far. I did it in the place where you're chasing the hooded man and beneath the Phoenix Gate. And like there were some instances where I was hit pretty badly, but it always turned out well because there were like enough potions on the field that if you did got like the maximum amount of potions and high potions, you get on the spot healing after every major encounter, and it was enough to keep going. So I do feel like a no potion run, like doing it the specific way that I did make the game more challenging, though it wasn't organically challenging at that point. And if it gets to the point where you have to do this in order to have some moderate challenge on what is supposedly the action focus mode, then I think you might have made that mode a bit too easy. So I feel like the difficulty could use a bit more bite.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's not like turn your brain off.
This is me comparing, and this is especially drawing for me because I went I'm playing Grizzly's F as well with my friend, and there are various instances in Grizzly's F where I die to normal encounters. Never mind boss battles.
Yeah, like you just run into an enemy that gives you a run for your money, and then N16 doesn't really have anything like that.
Final Fantasy 16, like normal encounters, like normal mobs, is like kind of a joke.
They really are. Like I mean, I just kind of repeat the same combos. They get me by, and I've never really had to change my tactics. Honestly, my tactic is wail on the enemy.
But yeah,
it works every time.
The challenge is in the boss fights in Final Fantasy 16. Even then, it's like a mild challenge. The mild challenge if you use potions. It's a moderate challenge if you don't use potions, I think. A moderate to decent challenge, I think.
But I do think the bosses are pretty good though. Like I mean, they're pretty creative. And no two bosses feel the same, so I give it a. I
say like the mini bosses and the bosses does feel adequately challenged if you do the no potion run that I set up. If not, then I don't know.
Then it's not, yeah, it's still pretty easy.
Yeah. Side quests.
They suck.
They suck?
Yeah, they suck. I'm not even gonna mince words. I mean, I will say this. I do have it on good authority from a lot of people that the side quests apparently do vastly improve in quality later on. I'm not there yet, so every side quest has been talk to this guy, then go talk to this guy, then come back, or hey, I need some plants, go to this other field, get the plants, come back. I will say,
the side quests, like the things you do to them does feel remedial. Like when you first get to Sid's hideout, like one of the side quests is just you, hey, can you get these bowls to people? And can you collect the wood from across the hallway?
And then come back, and then you complete the quest.
I was like, they have some decent world building to them, but they do feel very
I want to say, I guess generic is the only word I can think of. It's just blase.
Like generic or tedious at the worst, I think.
Yeah.
I like somewhat the world building they provide. Especially once you get to the village and then you see how they treat Clyde like shit because he's a bit apparently a bearer.
Which that part, like parts like that are good.
Yeah.
But I wish they were more common.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of the times they just boil down to, you know, killing a monster and coming back, or delivering this, coming back. They do unlock monster hunts, like bounties, kind of like Final Fantasy 12 had later on in the game. Those are a little more fun. I mean, like, they're still pretty easy, but you know, going out and finding a specific enemy and having a semi, I guess, adequate challenge, somewhat, can be pretty fun. But overall, as it stands where I'm at right now, the side quests for the most part are pretty dull.
And as for rewards, they feel
not very rewarding. I mean, like the crafting system is, you know, it's there. It can help a little bit. It's not really that essential. And experience, I mean, it's nice, but
I do feel like they don't feel substantial.
Yeah, it really
I don't know if that's just me coming from Grace's F though, because like Grace's F, like the side quest does feel very in the background, just because you get side quests from in request and just read the item description and like this little story to get, which is sometimes little cute stories. But then I do feel the impact from it, just because they give you a bunch of SP, which you can use to level up your titles, which does go a long way making things feel rewarding. But
yeah, because even if the tasks you're doing aren't like that interesting,
it also helps like they're just item. Most of the item in requests are like item requests, so you and so you might be able to just hand it over or you dualize to get them. And like the one that actually gets you to go out are like sub events, which does have some interesting event that happen to them. The sub events that Grace itself gets, like, you got one where you get documents for Major Victoria, which is interesting, especially since she's a character you fight later on. So you get some report with her. You get one where you get summon spirits for Pascal, which is really cool. And like, so far, the side quest in Final Fantasy 16, like, it feels very generic, as well as not feeling that rewarding to do.
Yeah, because like I said, I mean, you get some money, some experience, not even a lot of experience, you know, just...
And like,
they're really there to
feel... Like, mostly all of the events just feels very safe. Like, by the numbers, I think, which is why it feels so unsatisfying sometimes to do them, especially since the reward is whatever sometimes.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess only time will tell if they do improve. Like I said, everyone I've talked to and every kind of like review or video I've seen of it will say, oh yeah, they get a lot better later on. So okay, all right, you know, I guess we'll see when I get there. But as of right now, yeah, they're not that good.
What do you think the itemization of leveling?
In terms of like what the crafting, it's fine. I mean, it's not. Yeah, I mean, you get the materials, you can craft a weapon. I always find that I have the materials. I will say like the itemization seems really linear so far. Yeah, and honestly, from where I am, which is pretty far, it hasn't changed.
Yeah, it's like basically every major event like that you can get boss drop from the icon you fought, basically, and then you craft it to make a better weapon and better armor, and that's the way I see it.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, sure, you get some decent stat boosts.
There's not much. There's not much. Let's see.
I think depth. I guess there's not a lot of depth
because like it's very. It just goes through a really linear path in terms of itemization.
And like, you don't get any like really special effects from either your weapons or armor. They're there just for numbers. There's nothing, you know, you can't really do anything with them. So like, I'm fine with just getting better equipment and stuff. Sure, yeah. But like, it does feel very like, it just feels like the RPGMs can feel a bit tacked on in this game, because like I'm okay with the itemization being pretty straightforward as long as like the leveling system got some pretty interesting customization. But even the leveling system customization here does feel really linear. Yeah, and that's actually one of the, aside from the combat, that is one of the biggest points of contention. Aside from the combat, where it's like people say that the RPG elements in general are pretty inconsequential, and that's actually, honestly, that is something I pretty much agree with. I do think that like things like leveling up, you got, again, we talked about the crafting, even the skill tree upgrades really don't feel that substantial. And I feel like I almost feel like I could ignore it at the end of the day. Like your icon moves, like, oh, you can go from 1 hit to 2 hits with this move. You can increase the radius of this other move. Like, it's really nothing that substantial. It feels like, yeah, I mean, I've played games that aren't RPGs that feel more like RPGs, you know, with their RPG elements in them. Like, I feel like I could ignore the skill tree.
I do feel like, in terms of RPG, like you learning new stuff, it does feel pretty unsatisfying, just because like everything costs so less SP to get. You could just get everything from the get-go at the end of chapter 1, I think.
Yeah, like I got all the like the basic moves I wanted right from the get-go. Like you got your like what do they call it? Like when you close the distance between you and the enemy, that slat. Like I got that right off the bat, and then you got your, you know, just little quality of life things, and you know, and like even where I'm at now, like I have so many ability points that I haven't used just because I don't feel the need to use them on anything. So like I've pretty much, for the last several hours in the game, I haven't even gone to the skill tree tab because I just don't need anything on there. And the most I'll do is when I get a new icon, I'll go there and then just like maybe level up an ability and then, you know, see if I want to use it in combat, but that's it.
Yeah, it does feel like very in the background in terms of like RPG and the customization, I think.
I think, yeah, for me personally, this is probably the most disappointing aspect.
It does feel underwhelming how like the RPG and customization of a Final Fantasy game does feel so underdeveloped.
Yeah,
because in Final Fantasy 7, you're always looking around for like better material combinations. In Final Fantasy 10, like even though the sphere grid was linear, were some branching paths where you could dedicate your time to get new skills and abilities, and those skills and abilities does feel substantial.
Yeah, like you could maybe have Yuna deviate and become more of a black mage.
And this is very apparent, having come off of Vesperia and Grace's F, where you're constantly learning new skills from weapons in that game, and or learning getting various titles and looking through each title, seeing which one you want to learn currently. I was always interacting with the itemization or RPG mechanics of Vesperia, Grace's F, and Abyss.
Yeah, like going through like the skills menu and trying to mix and match and be like, oh, well, what do I want to have my skill points on? Do I want this? Do I want that? With 16, I could largely ignore it. You know, that's the thing. It's so minimal in the customization and RPG department, and I think that's, for me personally, that is probably the most disappointing aspect of 16 for me.
I would say like Final Fantasy 16 does lean heavily towards the story and the combat.
Yeah, the RPG elements are honestly kind of an afterthought. It's funny because this is in stark contrast to how 15 was, in the sense that 15 was really barely story driven at all until the last couple hours, whereas 16 is very cinematic heavy. It's just like
Final Fantasy 15 was all about creating this experience that mirrors going on a road trip with your bros, essentially.
Yeah, like it's not about like the big grand overarching story. It's about the camaraderie between Noctis and the boys. Whereas 16, it's like we mentioned before, it is very character focused, but it also is more invested in telling like a continuous story as well. And you know, because of that, like some people take issue with like, oh, there's too many cutscenes, there's this, there's that. I don't think it's good or bad. I really think it depends on, you know, the player, on what you look for in an RPG and what in a video game in general. But yeah, it is pretty much a stark contrast. If you're coming off of 15 and jumping into 16, yeah, you're in for a lot of cutscenes. So,
I mean, it's just jarring if you're going from like a more RPG focused game in general, I think, to Final Fantasy 16.
Yeah,
So-
like it's almost like it's like a Xenosaga almost. Like it's very about, you know.
I mean, even Xenosaga got like more interesting and involved RPG mechanics than Final Fantasy 16 in regards to the tech tree and stuff.
Yeah, tech tree, ether abilities,
Yeah.
you know, all that kind of stuff, and you know.
But like, I do feel like, at least so far, like the icon skill tree is the most substantial. But even then, that does have some limits since you can only equip 2 icon abilities, like cooldown abilities.
Per like each
And
individual
most of the stuff you learn in an icon ability are those cooldown abilities. So it does feel very limited, just because like you're like, if you do want to maximize the SP, the skill points you get, you are going to probably look at the skill tree, the abilities you got in that skill tree, and just choose 2 to focus on. At least that's that's how I feel so far. It could change since I'm pretty early in the game, but that's just the feeling I get.
Yeah, and like I mentioned before, like for me, like when the only time I'll ever go to the ability tree anymore is I get a new icon, I look at the moves, I upgrade, you know, give it an upgrade or a move, an upgrade or 2, and that's it. I pretty much stop there. So
I do feel
definitely.
I do feel another part is like, once you learn the skill, it doesn't get any better besides like the generic way in terms of getting stronger, I think.
Yeah,
like
I mentioned before, like it's like, oh, an extra hit for this move or extra range for this move, and you know, nothing very substantial.
Yeah. Even though it seems like I'm nitpicking a lot on Final Fantasy 16, I still enjoying a lot. The story and combat is still very fun, even though I do have some gripes with the combat so far. But that might change when I get more icon abilities. But like the story and the combat highs is still making me invested in the game.
Yeah,
So,
for sure,
yeah.
and me too. It's been that way, and I think both the story and the combat do just continuously get better as you go. You know.
Okay, but this is a real big lead up to the real topic.
Yeah, that was just the appetizer for what's to come here for this next part.
So you play more of Final Fantasy 16 than me. So does this feel like a Final Fantasy game to you?
that is the question of the ages.
The topic today is a video game series identity. So, do you think Final Fantasy 16 feels like a Final Fantasy game?
So, Final Fantasy is an interesting beast compared to a lot of other.
Yeah. I mean, let me just ask another question then. Do you think video game series have an identity besides the developer just making it into another game in the series? Or do you think that's just arbitrary and it doesn't really matter what they think, and it's just matters what the developers and publishers think?
At the end of the day, I really do think that's what it comes down to. Is it really is what the developers want it to be. But there are instances where I feel like a franchise is set in a certain way to the point where there's an expectation. Like, for example, like Dragon Quest. Dragon Quest is a series where you know exactly what you're getting every time you jump into it. And anything different will just throw people off. It is, like, that series is just a very safe RPG series, very basic story. You know, your classical high fantasy setting, very safe turn-based combat, and anything different at this point will completely throw players off, and honestly will probably make the fan base mad, if anything. So
isn't the next Dragon Quest going to be an action combat system?
The only thing I heard about it was that it's going to have, like, apparently like a more of an adult story, kind of like how 16 is. As for the combat, I haven't heard that. Probably that could have been possible.
I think I heard that on Twitter, but I don't know if that's true or not, because it's Twitter, so you know.
Yeah, not exactly the most reliable source always, but what makes Final Fantasy different from that is the fact that Final Fantasy from the very beginning has always.
So wait, let me before you answer that. So do you think there is certain, like, a game series is based on previous games how they're built, rather than just what the developers and publishers are saying.
Oftentimes, I think so.
Yeah,
Because
okay.
like I said, it does create a precedent,
Yeah.
and then
I
when
do
you
feel like I probably do think that way too, in that I do think like various video game series does have various identifiers or like something unique that do make them that series. And I think it's pretty silly to just dismiss that just because the developers and publishers are saying it's no longer that way. Especially since it might not even be the original developers working on that series anymore.
Which is actually funny because that is the case of Final Fantasy, in the sense that the creator of Final Fantasy like stepped down from that franchise like decades ago, so now it's run by completely different people. So and yeah, so for the most, yeah.
I do feel like the series should retain a certain identity still, going from game to game. Even if the developers want to go a different path, it should still retain that core identity still, even if it's presented in a different way.
Because like I think
developed in a different way. Like take Tales. Tales is all about it's a party-based action combat system. It's based on character building, character bonding, skit system, and just being action combat system. That's based around combos somewhat. Usually, in order to do damage to them, or at least doing moves that connect well to each other.
And that's what the series, was built off of. So I think, like, I could see why, like, for example, if you made the next Tales game turn-based, that would throw people off, and I don't think a lot of people would like that.
And if you make Tales into a character action game like Bayonetta or Devil May Cry, I think that would I would understand the outcry for that, because even though they both have action combat systems, their design philosophy is like on total opposite spectrums in terms of like action combat system, or even making it like a Souls game.
Yeah, it would just like you take a familiar brand and you revamp it and then say here's the next Tales.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It just so
and
I don't,
especially it will feel especially jarring because it's like how about if that new direction is now the direction where the game is going to go head into, and that's not a direction you might not like.
Because even if you look like some of the last,
that's what's kind of happening in Yakuza right now.
Yeah, I was actually about to bring that up as an example. Is you look at Yakuza Like a Dragon, and even though it has a completely different combat system, it still does very much feel like a Yakuza game through and through. It's got the you got your sub stories, you got your
it does feel like Yakuza. So like Yakuza 7. Does feel very in line with the other Yakuza games, even though there are some people who are, I think, they're reasonable in except they are that the turn-based combat system might be the way the
norm now.
No, maybe the norm now, especially since like the beat 'em up system, action system was the norm back then. But to see how their main series changed, I can understand. I think it's perfectly understandable to be upset about that.
Yeah, so
and
when I look at it,
and then you see Legend of Zelda with Breath of the Wild. Like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are wholly different. They feel pretty different from the other traditional 3D Zelda games. And like, I know people are gonna say that it's just replicating the feeling of the original Zelda 1. But I think a video game series like identity goes way beyond to just how the first game went. It's like a accumulation of all the game series that evolved from that concept. So like even though like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are trying to replicate the feeling of Zelda 1, the Zelda series in general has a lot more identifiers or identities than just being an exploration game. There are people who really love the dungeons of the 3D traditional Zelda games, like in Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and those type of dungeons aren't found anywhere in Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. And like I'm like I'm in a weird spot where I do like Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild as an open world game, but not as a Zelda game.
Yeah,
And-
because I haven't played either of those, but from what I've seen, if you take away Link and just change the title, it's completely unrecognizable.
Yeah, and that's why people are somewhat upset about how the Breath of the Wild format might be the norm, because like we might not get another 3D traditional Zelda game, which sucks. So I can understand why people can be upset about a series apparently not having the
like that familiarity, I guess, maybe the consistency,
the qualities that make them like the series to begin with.
Because I think if you look at, I know we keep bringing it up, but like Tales is a good example. Like if you look at the last couple Tales games, like look at Berseria, look at Arise, they have like fairly different combat systems from the older school ones, but they're still very much in line with what we expect from a Tales game. They still don't, like, Arise doesn't feel out of place. Like Arise has a combat system pretty much unlike most other, like any other Tales game, really. You know, but
it still feels like a Tales combat system still, with how it's party based, how you got each character having their own type of moveset that feels interesting to use, how each character together feels like one cohesive party, how the combat system is still about chaining moves together in order to perform combos. Like that is still in Arise though. Even if the bosses are unstackable, you are still chaining combos together in order to do them and then dodging when the time is appropriate still.
Yeah, and same with Berseria, same with they all feel in line. So I guess my answer to that question at the end of the day would probably be, in a lot of ways, 16 doesn't really feel recognizable as the Final Fantasy game.
I'm just saying, like a video game series that then does have qualities to it that does matter, rather than saying it's just based on what the developer and publisher says.
Right.
Which gets us to ask, say, does Final Fantasy 16 feel like Final Fantasy? Now, I don't think I'm the best person to answer that, because I barely play any Final Fantasy. I played Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy Tactics, which isn't a traditional Final Fantasy game, since that's a spin-off. Final Fantasy 10, 12, 13, 14, and 15. So, like, my perspective is pretty skewed.
Because Final Fantasy is a little different of a beast, because ever since its inception, Final Fantasy has always been about kind of like reinventing the wheel with every game. Like Final Fantasy 1, for example, is a very like standard by the numbers, like Dungeons and Dragons RPG. You got your basic character classes. You know, it's got
but you got to take account the development cycle, and like, so like Final Fantasy was basically developed as like a last ditch game. Their like last game to see if Final Fantasy 1 failed, Sakaguchi and his company would probably not be in the gaming industry still.
And there'd be no Final Fantasy series now.
But like Final Fantasy 1 was a pretty risky endeavor, I think, because it was a pretty different game from the rest of the games that what was the company that they were at that?
I think they were just called Square at the time.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay, it was a really different game from the rest, because they didn't make an RPG before, I think, or at least not. Yeah.
And so you got that, and then when it was a success, and Final Fantasy 2 comes out, their design choice was to, okay, guys, let's change everything and not make it anything even remotely like Final Fantasy 1. So, okay, yeah, sure, it's got like all the traditional RPG, like, you know, qualities, like your turn-based combat, but that was pretty much expected of RPGs. I mean, that was, you know, that's not anything, your overall map. But yeah, like Final Fantasy 2 has a completely different like character progression system. It has a little bit more meat to the story, not much, but it's there. And then you got Final Fantasy 3. It's got a job system. Final Fantasy 4, obviously 4 is more traditional, very like by the numbers, straightforward, not a whole lot of character. But my point is that every Final Fantasy game is different from the other. Like for example,
like take Final Fantasy 7 and 8.
I was literally just about to make that example too.
Like
Actually,
let's just take the combat systems, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The Final Fantasy 7 combat system is all about equipping material and using like all the various abilities you get from those material in battle. Final Fantasy 8, from like, this is just from me hearing about it since I never played it, but Sword played it, so he can confirm. It's all about tracing.
Mm-hmm.
And like, even though they're both ATB system, they don't really feel like a progression of the same combat system.
Yeah, like like the ATB system is honestly the only thing they have in common.
Like if you were to compare Symphonia, Abyss, Vesperia, and even Graces, you can still feel like they're built off the same foundation still, but like change appropriately or like develop appropriately. You can't say that with Final Fantasy 7, 8. I don't know 9. Does
9 is more of like kind of a back to call back to the series root. But even that still has its own identity compared to the other Final Fantasies. But yeah, like 8 is one of the games that I think is unlike most other Final Fantasies, and not just its gameplay, but its setting as well.
Even Final Fantasy 10 that feels different from Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 8 in terms like in regards to the combat system.
You know, because that has like the conditional turn-based battle system, the turn chart, and Final Fantasy 10 doesn't have an overworld map anymore. Final Fantasy 10 ditches traditional leveling system completely. Like, so like Final Fantasy,
I'm just limiting it to the combat systems because most a lot of people harp on that in terms of being Final Fantasy identity. But even their combat systems don't feel very similar to each other, I think.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, like again, like they're
besides them being a typical ATB or turn-based combat system.
Mm-hmm. But even then, outside, like it's not even unique to really this series anymore. Like there's lots of other games that use kind of a similar system now, so it's not like it's unique to Final Fantasy. But like so the reason I bring that up is because Final Fantasy is always trying to like reinvent the wheel in some way. So like for the most part, no two games feel the same. So I think that 16, it might not have the qualities necessarily that you might be familiar with in some other games, but it's also in line with kind of the design philosophy of this franchise in that it's different. It wants to be different from the others, and 16 succeeds in that regard. There's no other Final Fantasy game like 16. The same exact way, there's no other Final Fantasy game like 12 or so it matches the design like philosophy of Final Fantasy. So I think in that sense, it's pretty much in line with what Square has always done with it since the beginning. So that's my take on that.
Like for me, the identity of Final Fantasy has been always one, being cinematic as all heck.
Mm-hmm.
Two, being as experimental as it is, because I feel like each Final Fantasy game I played do feel incredibly different from each other, from progression systems to even combat systems sometimes, just because there are certain aspects of each combat system that each game focuses on differently. Like it doesn't feel like a progression of turn-based combat system building upon each other. It feels like they build ATB system, turn-based combat system, totally independent from each other sometimes.
No, I agree for sure.
Okay. But yeah, so like I do feel like based on those two identifiers, and 3, maybe the music being really good, which I think Final Fantasy 16 does fall in that category.
Mm-hmm.
I think like from my limited knowledge of the series, it does feel like Final Fantasy 16 does feel in line with the other Final Fantasy games.
Yeah, for sure. So ultimately, I would say the answer is yes, it does.
But like overall, like a video game series identity should be based on the past though, in terms of what that game series did and what made it unique, rather than what the developer publisher says. But
because I mean,
but we still feel Final Fantasy 16 fit that moniker just because how the past Final Fantasy games has been like at the inception of each title. Like,
and plus, I also do think that change can be a good thing in a long franchise too, in general, because sometimes a series can become stagnant. So there's also kind of that like happy medium of like, okay, so we want to keep kind of the essence of this, but we also want to like evolve or kind of like change something up a little bit. So there's it could be circumstantial too,
like Persona 1 and 2 to 3 or 4 or 5.
Yeah, they're like nothing. They're nothing alike. I mean, because 3, 4, and like from 3 and onwards, they pretty much just take the formula of 3 and polish it up or add stuff. But like Persona 3 and Persona 2 are 2 totally different beasts. But at the end of the day, I think that worked out in its favor, because Persona is as popular as it is because of Persona 3. It's completely unlike any other Persona game and any other, really not a whole lot of RPGs like it. So it kind of cemented its own identity in that way. So I think that in that case, that overhaul in the gameplay was for the better.
Now, is that change direction okay to do? Yeah, I think so. So. It's not like it retroactively make the past games doesn't exist still, even if the series is taking to a new direction. But I do think I do sympathize with people who like the older styles though, since what they want might not be anywhere else besides that series, and it's changing now.
Right.
So I can understand their frustration in that aspect.
Yeah, because ultimately I don't think it's as black and white as like, oh, this is good or this change is good or this change is bad. It's it's more nuanced. But yeah, I could see both sides. I could see some people. I could understand people getting upset at maybe the direction Final Fantasy 16 took, or I could understand the opposite side. People saying, okay, change is good. So it really it's ultimately up to the individual.
Yeah. I'm still a bit salty at how apparently the only Zelda games we're gonna get is the Breath of the Wild / Tears of the Kingdom format.
Yeah, because I mean, as far as I could tell in terms of like the clips I've seen, Tears of the Kingdom really just looks like copied and pasted of Breath of the Wild, just
it does some things to expand on Breath of the Wild. But it does feel very much like expansion pack.
And since Breath of the Wild did so well, Tears of the Kingdom looks like it's doing well. So that's unfortunately that's gonna be the norm it kind of really sucks.
I think like Anuma said that this is going to be the format too, which is
okay. Well, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, but yeah, is there anything else to add on this topic?
I don't think so. I think I said pretty much everything I had to say.
But yeah. The lead up probably is longer than the actual topic, but
yeah, but I think the build up was necessary to it. To be fair,
but still, yeah. But overall, I do think a video game series identity matters, and like our qualities to a series that does make it stand out. And just being another game in the series, but not having those qualities doesn't mean it's indicative of the series, even if the developers and publishers name it so. But I also think it's important to retroactively look at each game and see what is like the commonality between the games. And like just because the game is going to a different direction doesn't mean it feels totally random.
So yeah, that's pretty much all. That's pretty much what I got to say. So
yeah, I think that's all for today. This is Sirus Gaming Spot signing off.
See you later, everyone.